Ever since he debuted on The Walking Dead in 2012, the Governor has been my favorite television character. But just a few weeks ago something happened. 5 years after its ending, I decided to binge the show Boardwalk Empire. I was thus introduced to the character of Richard Harrow. Sorry, Governor, but you have now been dethroned. Boardwalk Empire is a 5-season HBO television series set in the early 1920s. While the show features a large cast of characters, the main focus is on corrupt Atlantic City politician and bootlegger Enoch "Nucky" Thompson, played by Steve Buscemi. This character is loosely based on real-life person Enoch Johnson. Many characters on the show are loosely based on real people, a majority of them being notorious criminals, like for example Lucky Luciano, Arnold Rothstein, Meyer Lansky, and Al Capone. The character we are here to talk about today, though, is not based on a real person, although similar people may very well have lived. Richard Harrow, played by Jack Huston, was introduced late in Season 1. We first meet him when Jimmy Darmody, a main character played by Michael Pitt, visits an army hospital for his annual checkup. Darmody is a veteran of World War I who now lives the life of a bootlegging gangster. Harrow is also a World War I veteran. Being an expert marksman, he served as a sharpshooter, a sniper, and during his tour in France, received some rather heavy damage to the left side of his face. He now wears a special kind of mask to cover the hideous scars up, a tin mask molded and painted to match the right side of his face. It's meant to camouflage the fact he's disfigured, which may work at a distance, but up close it simply looks uncanny, half a mannequin face. Anyway, both Darmody and Harrow are completely broken people due to their horrific experiences in the war, and because of that immediately form a bond. Darmody thus takes Harrow in with his mob outfit, and he quickly becomes a gangster's most trusted man. With his incredible marksman skills, he also becomes Darmody's main assassin. Suffice it to say, no one is as deadly with a gun in the show as Harrow is. He's right up there with Deadshot and Bullseye. So now you know who Richard Harrow is, in case you haven't seen the show. And if that does apply to you, I think it's best we say goodbye here, as we'll now be getting into heavy spoiler territory. If you haven't seen Boardwalk Empire, I highly suggest you end this video now, go watch the show, and come back when you're done. So at first, Harrow kind of comes off as a rather insignificant character. I figured he might even just be a one-shot character, appearing only in that one first episode, serving as a commentary on the horrors of World War I. But thankfully, he did appear again. Still, for the remainder of Season 1, it felt like the show could forget about him at any moment, and he'd be nowhere to be seen in Season 2. He was basically just a minor side character for the first season. Perhaps the creators of the show didn't intend for him to be a big character initially, but then realized what a great and fascinating character they had on their hands. I suspect that actually is the case, as by Season 2 we began to see a lot more of Richard Harrow and got to know him a lot better. We got scenes that focused just on him. For instance, we got scenes of him alone in his room working on his scrapbook. Harrow has a hobby of cutting out photos and images of typical family life from magazines, husbands and wives, couples with children, and then gluing them into his scrapbook. He admires these images with a sad smile on his face. It's the life he so desperately wants, a wife, kids, but can't have because of his horrific facial disfigurement and damaged soul. Harrow doesn't want to be a killer, he just wants to be a normal family man. But it's unattainable for him, and he has to settle for looking at these fake images. He also has a photo album filled with old photographs from his past, before he went to war. He used to live with his sister, Emma, who's the one who taught him how to shoot, and the two were once upon a time inseparable. Now though, they haven't seen each other for years. In another very touching scene, he removes his mask and allows Darmody's wife, an artist, to draw a portrait of him. It's during this scene that he relates to her about his once close relationship with his sister. Later we get an episode that features an entire subplot dedicated to Harrow, where he goes out into the woods to commit suicide. This of course fails, but only due to circumstance. He was seriously going to kill himself. Like I said, the man ain't happy about his life. Many characters on the show are merciless gangsters, men hungry for more power, money, and harems of women. But not Harrow. He stands out among the crowd. He is a reluctant gangster. He doesn't really want to be one, but it's all he can do. He's not good at anything besides killing, and no one is willing to give him a shot at another profession anyway, due to his face. It's either kill for Darmody or starve. Remember, when we first meet him in Season 1, he's wearing some pretty shabby looking clothes. He frankly looks like a bum. He wasn't even wearing a tie, and back in those days, it was custom for all men to wear ties at pretty much all times. When he begins to work for Darmody, we can assume that his wallet is pretty well filled, as he starts dressing a lot nicer. However, he never goes for flashy suits like the other crooks, and he never really adopts the gangster attitude and lifestyle. He doesn't seem to be friends with anyone else in the Darmody crew either, besides Darmody himself. We never see him socialize with anyone but Darmody and his wife. If it wasn't for Darmody, I doubt he ever would have become a gangster in the first place. I guess that kinda raises a question, was meeting Darmody good for him or bad? Of course, in Darmody's defense, he never meant for anything but to help Harrow, and frankly, Harrow seems to be his only true friend. I'd say Darmody is even more broken than Harrow is. Sure, his face is fine, but on the inside, he's completely dead. Physically, he's alive, but spiritually, he died back in a trench in France. He probably can't relate to people at all any longer, except for Harrow, which is why he likes to hang around them. Darmody double-crosses a lot of his so-called pals, but he never does it to Harrow, and I couldn't even imagine him doing so. When Darmody and his wife unexpectedly yet fittingly died at the end of Season 2, I wasn't sure what would happen with Harrow. These were the characters he was associated with, and now they were gone. Once again, I kinda half expected Harrow to just disappear from the series. But luckily he didn't. Instead, he did the only thing logical. He hung out with the last surviving Darmodys, Jimmy's extremely young and psychotic mother Jillian and his son Tommy. Following Jimmy's death, Jillian takes over his headquarters and turns it into a fancy brothel. The three of them live there like a happy, twisted family. Not quite the family life Harrow had imagined. He does bond with Tommy though and becomes a surrogate father of sorts. With Jimmy Darmody gone, a major character on the show was gone, and I guess it was only logical someone would fill up that void. I did not expect that someone to be Harrow though, but it was. In Season 3, Harrow goes from being a supporting character to one of the main characters. You wouldn't think that at the beginning of the season though, considering he's just hanging out in Jillian's whorehouse tending to the bar and Tommy. But a few episodes into the season, the unthinkable happened. He met a woman. Julia Zagorski, the daughter of Paul Zagorski, a veteran of the Philippine-American War, an acquaintance of Harrow's whom he met in a local American Legion. All of a sudden, Harrow now had his own group of supporting characters, completely separate from the rest of the cast. Paul is a pretty nasty guy, but Harrow immediately falls for his daughter Julia. I have to admit, I was very nervous at the beginning of this romance. I was afraid Julia would reject him, or that he himself would somehow mess it up. Boardwalk Empire is after all not a very happy show, so naturally I suspected this would somehow end badly. But no, instead of something so miserable happening, we instead got the sweetest storyline in the entire series, as Harrow and Julia begin to date. They go to the beach together, they go dancing, they go to a carnival. Tommy often accompanied them during these activities, and Harrow finally got to experience the family life he so strongly desired. In Season 4, Harrow has less screen time than in the previous season, but he's still important. We get scenes with him reuniting with his sister Emma, far away from Atlantic City, and he finally decides to stop killing and settle down with his new family. He even marries Julia. But in order for him to ensure the future and safety of his family, he must commit one final crucial murder for Nucky Thompson. Naturally, this one hit goes wrong, and Harrow is mortally wounded in the process. I knew it would happen. As soon as he said goodbye to his family at the train station, promising he'd see them in 3 days, I knew that he wouldn't. I knew this was one job he wouldn't be walking away from. Was I upset at this? Of course I was. But at the same time, I knew it couldn't end any other way. A happy life for Richard Harrow just wasn't to be. He was doomed from the start. As soon as he left for the war, his life was over. Did he deserve this? Both no and yes. Sure, he decided to put killing behind him, but by that point he'd murdered so many people he couldn't even keep count, as stated by himself. It was frankly far too late to decide to change. And deep down, Harrow was of course a decent man, so I don't think he could have lived with so many murders on his conscience anyway. I think we should take solace in the fact that he at least got to live his dream life for a brief while. That's certainly better than nothing. Not every waking moment of his existence was a living nightmare, just most of it. Yeah, I said it couldn't end in any other way, but that doesn't mean I have to like it. At least he sacrificed himself for a good cause. With his deal with Nucky, his family's safety was ensured, and Tommy got to live a happy life. Or did he? This is where Season 5 kinda fucks up Harrow's sacrifice. Season 5, taking place 7 years later in 1931, reveals that a now teenage Tommy is living as a bum in Atlantic City. Of course, this is all a ploy to get close to Nucky so that he can kill him, which he does, and is then hauled off to prison. Perhaps he even got the electric chair, who knows? So Tommy completely ruined his own life, negating everything Harrow fought for. And what happened to Julia? How did she move on without Harrow? Her dad died too shortly after he did, considering he had a terminal illness. And now Tommy has run away? Julia obviously ended up completely alone and miserable. Thank you, Season 5, for messing everything up. Did the writers even realize this, or did they actually want the show to end as depressingly as possible? Well, let's just forget about Season 5. Richard Harrow is an incredibly layered, compelling and tragic character. His doomed story is among the saddest I've ever seen, and just thinking about those few happy moments he had with Julia and Tommy is truly bittersweet for me. On top of that though, the guy was also a complete badass. We learn immediately that he's a crack shot with a gun, but the Season 3 finale also proved that he was frickin' Rambo. In his most badass moment in the entire series, Harrow storms Jillian's brothel to save Tommy, and in the process takes out almost the entire Gyp Rossetti crew, single-handedly. The guy was a frickin' one-man army. The most awesome moment in television history. And Gyp Rossetti was a character I really enjoyed as well. He was a terrific, scary villain, and seeing Harrow totally kick his ass was certainly interesting. I didn't think that was going to happen. A badass, complex, tragic, sympathetic, and let's not forget, incredibly unique. While most characters on the show were great, we've seen similar types of characters in other shows and movies. But there's never been a character quite like Richard Harrow. The writers of the show obviously deserve a lot of the credit for that, but much of it should also go to the actor, Jack Huston. It's one of those performances where the actor becomes the character. Not having heard of this guy before, I was forced to look him up, because I almost began to believe that this Richard Harrow was real. He is so well portrayed, and the effects of his facial disfigurement is so well done, I thought they'd gone back in time and hired an actual World War I veteran. He doesn't feel like a character, and Huston's performance doesn't feel like a performance. It all feels real. Huston does not play him like a normal guy. He gives the character a lot of odd quirks. He makes strange grimaces, weird throat sounds, and his voice is very rough and gravelly. He kinda sounds like Batman actually. Harrow obviously has trouble speaking, and is probably ashamed of his rough-sounding voice too. So he doesn't talk too much, and when he does, it's usually short sentences. It's clear that his facial disfigurement is having a physical effect on him, which it naturally should. If you're missing half of your face, you're not going to speak normally. This is in stark contrast with how Aaron Eckhart portrayed Two-Face in The Dark Knight, who acted just like he used to before the accident. That's not Eckhart's fault though. Nolan told him to play it that way. Out of the two, Harrow is far more realistic, and while his disfigurement is less extreme than Harvey's, I actually find it more gruesome. It feels more real, and we're also shown it sparingly. As a result, whenever we do see it, it has a greater impact. And in case you're a Boardwalk Empire fan who just happened to find this video and you're wondering what's up with all the Batman references, well, it's because this channel is normally about Batman and his rogues gallery. Richard Harrow, the man who unwillingly became a monster, desperately tried to become human again, succeeded for a brief while, and then died for his sins. It truly was an experience to witness this tragic and bittersweet tale, an experience quite unlike any other. I can with confidence say that Harrow is the greatest character in television history, and it's madness that Jack Huston never received any award for his performance. Upon looking the actor up, I discovered that he played the lead in that unnecessary Ben-Hur remake that no one saw. I just hope that dumb decision didn't kill his career, as this guy is truly a force to be reckoned with. Hopefully we'll see him in something good again. Of course, I'll never be able to picture him as anything but Richard Harrow, despite the fact he's almost unrecognizable in the role. Richard Harrow, you may just be a fictional character in a HBO gangster show, but I will always carry you with me in my heart. And no, I don't have a crush on him. At least I don't think I have. As always, remember, Arkham Asylum awaits you in the next video.